Thank you very much, first of all, for joining our session today. My name is Izabela, and I will be a moderator of the session. Today is our third webinar series with a theme around innovative leadership. And before we go to present our special guest speaker, let me tell you a little more about Fanshawe CTS, what we do, and how we can support one another. So overall, our vision is to make clients better. And keeping this in mind, we work with industry leaders, we work with clients from all different sectors to help them achieve their learning outcomes. And overall, we try to understand what are their needs and what are the learning expectations, what are the gaps existing there. We value working with community partners, with amazing presenters as James. And together, as I said, from the vision point of view, we try to support the growth of the businesses in our community and the growth of leaders around us as well. So, that being said, I'm honored to introduce you to a very special guest speaker, who's James Todd. And James, trust me, he knows innovation from the inside out. He worked in innovation-intensive businesses all of his life. Along the way, he has been part of the creative projects in an astonishing area of fields, ranging from architecture to parks to industrial IT, generations in economics, and all over the place. So definitely he knows a lot about innovations. So years of in-depth his study led to a graduate degree in innovation and leadership. He earned his speaking skills delivering to the toughest of audiences, first-year college students with creativity and deep insight. James believes in the inner creativity of every person and the possibility for innovation inside an organization just like yours. So I'm sure you're excited to learn all about it from James. So all over to you, James.
Thank you very much. So to all of the people gathered here, you work in or manage a profitable, forgiving business. You have nothing but high-performing teams. They sing Kumbaya together every day. You don't have to pay much attention to the numbers because you exceed expectations all the time. Nothing changes in your world and everything is rosy. Is that your business? I didn't think so. No. Running a business in this country, especially a small to medium-sized business, is a tough row to hoe, and especially tough right now, given that we've had to put on hold many functions and change many functions. No, this is a difficult time, and you're on the hot seat. It's VUCA. Have you heard of that before? It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And with so many questions now, which products do we keep? Which new products do we introduce? Which new services do we introduce? What's our service delivery model? Should we change our whole business model? Now, more than any other time, you have to innovate. What's that? What does innovate mean anyway? And what am I supposed to do? That's a legitimate question. So what I'd like to talk about for the next hour is first of all, what innovation really is, and in keeping with the theme of the series, what you can actually do. So, who's with me? Do we have people who find that this is what they want to talk about? I hope so. So my question is, what question do you come with today? What kinds of questions are on your mind? You can just type them into the chat box, type them into the chat function, and Izabela will read out a couple.
So don't be shy, just type in a question from innovation point of view, and I'm sure James will be more than happy to follow it. We just have one comment: going forward in our new world, innovation is definitely part of our new world.
Absolutely. And I hope that over the course of the next hour, we can touch on a handful of things that you can use in this new world. So, hi, my name is James Todd, and I'm thrilled to be here today. I come from work worlds where innovation and analysis sat side by side all day long. Feels like architecture, where you have to balance between keeping the building from falling down and keeping the building from floating away, as one colleague used to say. Feels like privatization, graphic design, marketing, newspapering, magazine publishing, new venture consulting, all of these areas where novel, new ideas are equally as important as acting on an idea. So sometimes you need creativity and empathy, sometimes you need analysis and action. I've learned that innovation is not an alien or unusual field of effort. It's something you personally can do every day if you put your mind in the right place. I've learned that innovation is an inside job. What does that mean? That means you have to get inside people to innovate. So let's talk about innovation then. And I'm going to talk about 4 themes. I'm going to set the table and then we'll dig into those themes. There, that slide describes the 4 themes. Any guesses as to what the 4 themes might be for the leadership of innovation? If you have a guess, you can type it into the chat box for everyone to see. So there you go. I'm going to move on. First of all, what is innovation anyway? Let's define that. Well, I've actually already done it. Innovation is coming up with novel and useful ideas that are then implemented. So creativity is the act of having those ideas. Innovation is having the ideas plus acting on them. Innovation means ideas plus implementation. It's as simple as that, or as complex.
James, on top of that, we just have a few comments: be bright, vision, new idea, sail through. So those are a very few questions, few points to follow as well.
Excellent. Those are the idea of vision is going to come up very quickly. To be innovative isn't a one-day event. It's a culture. It's a way of thinking and doing and being. It's not just an event. It's not just something that one team does. It's something that everybody does. Events occur when you try out one idea. Culture occurs when you have ideas and pursue them regularly. Build on that day after day after day. Creating an innovation culture is not a one-day event or a seminar. It's a process. So how do we innovate every day? Let's get going and talking about it. Here's a diagram that summarizes many of the key features of the culture of innovation. I'll describe it for you briefly. How many people here are hockey fans? Well, if you're a hockey fan, you'll probably be able to recognize each one of these categories in your hockey. So for example, symbols. You look at a jersey, there's a symbol of a team, and every team has a team symbol. Some of those jerseys have C's and A's on them. And those C's and A's are symbols of the heroes who are on that team. Someone who is tagged to be a leader in the locker room or a leader in their team. I add another ring that's not showing here between heroes and rituals called actions, because there are some actions or behaviors that we reward and some that we punish. We reward people who score goals, and we punish people by kicking them off the team if they're not scoring goals or if their goals scored against them often. Rituals. Rituals are patterns of action that are so familiar that we replicate them all the time, and they have meaning for us. So, for example, a hockey team, when they come out onto the ice, the goalie always comes out first. There's a ritual for a hockey team. At the core are values. You could also think of that as purpose. You need to have a purpose-driven, value-driven core that drives the rest of the practices that a business or a team or a organization pursues. So there's a model that you can use to think about culture. Now, I'm not going to do a presentation that unpacks each one of those. That would be too much like a lecture. What I want to talk about is 4 particular aspects that leap out of there, 4 keys to unlocking culture. Imagine this, you're in your morning walkabout, or you're about to have your good morning meeting with your staff. What are you going to say? What are you going to say besides the same old numbers report? You know, sales were down, year-to-year comparison is up, the Dow Jones is down, gold is up, down, up, blah, blah, blah. What are you actually going to say that sticks? So, how many people here have a vision or a mission statement in their organization? I would bet that the chat line says yes, 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 yes.
We actually have a very good question in terms of innovation itself.
Yes.
It's in regards to, do you think at this pandemic time, is it better to develop a radical innovation or incremental innovation?
Interesting. These are profound times. And some of the changes that have to be made in a business around their business model or their offerings are probably radical changes. The curious thing is that we have to deliver them very quickly, and delivering radical change quickly is difficult. So it often is easier to pick out incremental changes that lead toward that larger radical change. Radical innovation is often something that takes time to imagine. Not necessarily a long time, but it takes time and effort to imagine. And some businesses don't have that time. Other businesses, I think of restaurants, for example. Some restaurants had to pivot one day to the next and go from being table service to takeout service. And that kind of a change is a radical change for many businesses. They suddenly had to get takeout containers and packaging, and they had to change the way they handle the phone. But if they were able to incrementally identify each one of those pieces, they would be able to deliver a radical change. So that's, in these days, you probably have to do that.
That's a very good comment we have, a revolution versus evolution.
Yes, yes. Businesses have had the luxury of evolving for many, many years. And some small businesses can survive like that. But often we get disrupted. And a disruption could change our industry, like the entry of a new business, or it could be a disruption like COVID-19. And facing those disruptions is what triggers innovation inside a company. So one of the beginning points for our thinking is not the numbers, but the idea of vision and mission. Most people have a vision and mission. Can you recite it by heart? Oh, no, often not. Many people are not able to stand up and speak out and name their vision and state their vision. And that's the ideal thing to do when you're dealing with meetings with your staff. When you speak, lead with purpose and share the vision. You know that a mission connects directly to your key performance indicators. But that can be a paper exercise for most people. You write it down and you put it away and you know you've got it figured out. The key is to get this mission and vision inside people. And so you have to lead with purpose. So, excuse me. First, you have to have a vision or mission. So in the briefest terms, vision is about the future. This is a single sentence that imagines your big, hairy dream, your ultimate goal, what you're trying to achieve over the long term, how you see the world, and how you see the world changing because you're in it. Mission, on the other hand, emerges from our why. We want to start with why. We've probably all encountered the book by Simon Sinek, Start with Why. Mission statement encompasses our why. And it comes from the past. As Simon Sinek describes, we develop our why over our life history. It describes the state of our business today based on the past that we've come to. Mission is about your present and why you are doing what you are doing right now. So, do you have employees like that? Well, people want three things. People want autonomy. They want some freedom of action when they're at work. They want mastery. They want to do a good job. No one gets up in the morning and says, oh, I'm going to do an average job today. And third, people want purpose. Now, this was researched and documented by a fellow named Dan Pink. So your job as a leader is to communicate that purpose, and not in terms of numbers. It usually has to stick in their head, but it especially has to stick in their heart. It has to resonate with how they feel. So let's say your mission is to deliver excellent customer service first time, every time. Your job as a leader is to connect today's tactical challenge, today's innovation hope, with your purpose. Connect it with your sense of mission and vision. Now, remember, innovation is an inside job. In this case, it means getting your story, your mission, inside people. Now, this is fundamental to innovation culture because it's at the very center of that diagram I showed you. Once you have purpose, you can then lead boldly toward it. And that bold leadership invites bold ideas. So once you're clear about purpose, then you can be clear about bold ideas. Let me tell you a story briefly. I once had a supervisor named Neil, and Neil let me be a manager. He gave me the freedom to do what I had to do. I had to hire somebody. So I went through the usual process, invited applications, went through the piles, made an A pile, B pile, a C pile, shortlisted the A pile, interviewed people, came up with 3 perfectly wonderful candidates. How do I choose? How do I choose? So I went to Neil and asked him, Neil, how do I choose? And he paused just for a moment and said, You want to hire the person whose personal vision and personal mission most closely matches your corporate mission. That way you have less training and teaching to do. The skills we can always train. It's that attitude, that point of view about the future that you need to hire for. Remember VUCA? Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity? Well, having a vision helps combat volatility. There will always be shifts and changes, but once you have that vision, once you have that purpose, you know what your direction is in spite of rapid changes. So the first theme here is to lead with purpose and share the vision. The next thing we want to talk about is, imagine you want to spend a little part of your day opening your dashboard, having a really good look at those numbers. Is that what your dashboard looks like? Or maybe it's like that. Or perhaps it's even like that. It could be very complex tracking the numbers. But there they are. There's the numbers: customer satisfaction, sales volume, peaks and valleys. And there they are. Those 2 or 3 numbers staring right at you that you need to work on, that you need to change. Now, sometimes some further analysis is going to happen, but the fact is, you can't analyze your way towards a new idea. You need a different skill. And this is the time when you're looking at those things and you need to get ahead of the curve. So this is our second theme. Who knows what I mean when I talk about the normal curve? Normal curve. The chat line is probably typing in, yes, I think I recognize that.
I definitely recognize that, and I'm sure many of our participants do as well. So
sure.
I was still waiting. Oh, we have some comments, no idea. So there are some unknown there as well.
Oh, yes. So here's a picture of the normal curve. There's an S-shaped curve at the beginning where it starts out slow, climbs, the angle of attack changes, softens, and gets to a peak. And then that peak could last for any amount of time. In a business, you want that peak to last as long as you can. And then inevitably, a business or an organization will fall down the other side of the curve. And that pattern is fairly traditional. All businesses go through this cycle. So how do you keep from being on the second half of the curve? Well, what you need to do is start a new curve. So that blue line on the screen shows you a second curve. Once you get start up, scale, compete, then there's a transition you have to make. And you start up, scale, and compete all over again. The first curve, so here's the first curve, your original strategy, and your second curve on that blue line is a new strategy. And the place where innovation happens is that sweet spot when you're at the peak of one curve and the bottom of another curve. That first curve is all about management ideas you're familiar with already, about continuity, about management versus leadership, about operations and efficiency and predictability and scale, settled ways, formal systems, organizational structures. All of that's familiar. But achieving growth and change requires a second curve. So this second curve is where we add new skills to innovate. So instead of continuity, we need to foment discontinuity, a disconnection with the past and a connection with the future. It doesn't just need management, it needs leadership. Where before we needed to be efficient in our operations, now we need novelty, uniqueness, curiosity value. Where before we tried to manage things in predictable ways, we need to be unpredictable. We need to introduce features that aren't predictable, that show potential. And instead of following formal systems, we need to invent brand new ones. Adaptability. But how do we manage both? Well, the reality is we need both. We need management and leadership. We need efficiency and innovation, efficiency and invention. We need structure and adaptability. And this is why leading innovation is so difficult, because you as a leader have to do both. You have to choose the time to be a manager and choose the time to be a leader. Choose the time to direct and control resources, and choose the time instead to lead with purpose and to energize people over obstacles. You have to choose whether you're going to focus on deductive and reductive analysis to be efficient, and you're going to have to choose instead to invent and do something new. So as you already know, innovation is an inside job. How do we get inside that second curve? Well, the challenge is to get inside yourself so that you know that you have the ability to serve people from both sides of those columns, from both curves, some as a manager, some as a leader. So how does a manager manage both functions? Well, sometimes companies set aside skunk works and create a little team, push them off to the side, and allow them to be the innovators while everyone else maintains efficiency. Is that in the budget? Probably not. Another way to do it is to outsource it, just to go out and buy the solution that you're trying to find. Sometimes that's in the budget, sometimes that's not. The one thing you can do is create an environment where the second curve can do its work. And that's something you can control, and that's something called innovation. That's something called culture. Culture allows you the flexibility to draw on those skills when you need them. So, quick story. Here's another story about Neil. On the first day he hired me, he leaned over and looked me in the eye and said, "Can you manage differently?" And then he paused and said, "Can you think differently?" And I was encouraged and excited about the job, and I looked around at this wonderful day on this wonderful new job, and I said, "Yes, of course." And then he asked me what I meant by that. I stumbled for a bit, and he helped me out. He challenged me to balance my creative skills with my analytical skills. That some days I'm going to have to be creative, and some days I'm going to have to be analytical. Some days I'm going to have to ponder things, and other days I'm going to have to act on things. And from that beginning, I found the importance of having both sets of skills at the same time. This is an important thing for innovation, because there are a whole set of skills that we learn for managing business that actually get in the way of innovation, because they're not designed for innovation, they're designed for efficiency, operations, control, structure, the first curve. So here's a continuum. Scans from 1 to 9. On one side is the first curve. You could be a complete numbers geek and completely analytical about your business. And then on the far right-hand side is the second curve. You're a complete innovation guru. You are the Steve Jobs of your industry. Where do you want to be on that continuum? Take a moment, type in a number on your chat line. So we probably have a whole series of numbers popping up.
We have some fives right in the middle, but we actually also have a very good question.
Oh, good.
From the innovation point of view, how do we set up a pace, avoiding any distractions and keeping up, concentrating towards the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow?
Yes. Well, repeating what the pot of gold is a key feature, and that connects with purpose, which I've already described. That's always transmitted by people. And so you need inside an organization innovation heroes. I call them champions. And these champions are the people who are always looking for a new way, or always encouraging you to look for a new way. So you keep it up by reminding yourself regularly. I think most importantly is you reward anyone who takes that innovation action or is open to innovation ideas. By rewarding that behavior, we signal what's important in an organization. A massive change happened in a massive company called Procter & Gamble. They went from being a classic first curve company to being completely comfortable about being on two curves at the same time. And they introduced innovation thinking deliberately, and they didn't just put it in a silo, they sprinkled it through the organization and taught people new skills. And I think that's the third answer to this question about the pot of gold, is that people need to have personal creativity and allow it to come to work and show up in a meeting and to show up in a discussion. That's often difficult because we often self-suppress our creativity, and sometimes the environment doesn't reward that creativity. And to keep up the effort, we need to invest in a culture that rewards that kind of thinking. So, just to summarize, remember VUCA? Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity? Well, this second idea enables you to choose confidently in the face of uncertainty. So, leadership behaviors that got tomorrow's results are completely different than the leadership behaviors that will get tomorrow's innovations. So the second theme for innovation leadership is getting ahead of the first curve and getting onto the second curve. So imagine it's time for another meeting. Lovely chairs, nice big table, everybody's there. But this time it isn't your regular meeting. What I propose is that in every organization, small or large, you create an innovation team. You form a team around your biggest challenge, whether it's a new product or a new service, whether it's a new service delivery method. Why? Well, first of all, the idea that innovation comes from a special talent up at an ivory tower is a myth. The reality is that creative ideas that get implemented, innovated, are from teams, groups of people working together. So the right people, organized well, can unleash a considerable amount of talent on a problem and dig up ways to solve it, which is what you want after all. But notice a few things about this. First of all, you, as the leader, don't have to be the source of all the new ideas. There is a bias in the world where leaders expect that they have to lead with all of the creative ideas. They don't. You share the load. The team is the source of ideas. And you're in the role of encouraging them and making way for implementation. Leaders have an important task to fulfill, no question, but it's not necessarily being the most creative one on the team. Second, what you need is the right group of people. Diversity is the key. And if there's a big takeaway for today, that this is one of them. You want diversity on that team. You want to mix up levels of responsibility, people from different shifts, males, females, experienced workers and new workers. Most importantly, people who think like you and people who think completely differently than you. People you agree with on a regular basis, people you disagree with. So with the 4 or 5 people that you pull together, they need to be diverse, because the research has shown over and over again that these diverse teams are the most successful in coming up with innovation. By the way, the research is also clear. If you give them some support, they'll do even better. In particular, you need to pick those team members well. Is this the time to get the best and the brightest in the room? Not necessarily. Maybe a few, maybe one. But what you really want is people who are motivated, people who care about the problem at hand. They need to care about it somehow. And how do you find them? It could be as simple as asking them to volunteer. Put a notice up on the board and say, all you who are interested in solving problem X, come to the lunchroom at 12 o'clock. The research has shown here over and over again that it's this personal, internal motivation, people who care about the problem, are the essential role, provide the essential fuel for the creativity that you're looking for. So innovation is an inside job. So this is where you leverage your insight about the people who work with you and for you. A leader needs to think about the kinds of talents and skills that are around the table and pick out the ones that will create a diverse team of people who care about the problem. If you know someone doesn't care, doesn't matter how talented they are. If they don't care, they can't contribute in the way that you need them to.
James?
Yes, go ahead.
So we actually have a very good question related to this topic about how do you manage the ego? Because if we say innovation is an inside job, hopefully starting from the top. Yes. So how do you manage the ego of top management team to boost the innovation culture? Well, this is a tremendously important question, because the research has shown that the number one source of support for innovation in an organization is top leadership support. So if you don't have it, then you can't innovate. It's very difficult to create innovations and not have support for new ideas from the very top. How do you prevent that ego? Sometimes, and I've had to do this in my innovation practice, sometimes you advertise with results. Sometimes you have to just simply go ahead, solve the problem, and show them the results of solving the problem. That will help bring people on board. Another way to bring people on board, leaders on board, fellow leaders, or even in some cases our superiors, is to connect what you're proposing, connect what you're doing with the purpose of the organization. Most senior leaders can't argue with their mission statement. So if you can connect what you're doing to the mission statement, you're golden.
Even better if you can connect it to a set of statements around values, because many companies claim that they want to be innovative, but it's the ones who enable innovation who are truly committed. So one of the ways to manage the ego is to get them to think about something outside of themselves, some larger purpose, and that's what vision and mission does. It's interesting. That's the same way that we defeat ego in our personal lives, is by connecting with something that's larger and more important than just our mere self. So it works at the organizational level just as much as it works at the personal level. Of course, you're going to give this team some support. So they're going to need some logistical support. Not necessarily a lot, but enough. They're going to need a place to get together. Not necessarily fancy, but satisfactory. They're going to need sufficient resources. They're going to need a little of your time. They're going to need you as a leader to clear the red tape. Remember, red tape's only sticky on one side. So as soon as you get through it, you've created a pathway for people. So if you can be good at that, that's an important contribution to the team. And of course, you're going to give them just enough structure to run forward without limiting them. Let me tell you a quick Neil story. Neil did all of this in one major project that we engaged in Western Canada, which was putting on the Western Canada Summer Games. He didn't control the ideas. He put together a group who had lots of ideas. Yet it was a diverse group. There were people who were virtually strangers at the beginning on that group. He selected people who cared about events, who cared about putting on events, cared about the summer games, cared about sport and recreation. He gave them resources. He had a budget. He anticipated and put it together. And he was particularly good at clearing red tape. And throughout all of this, even though Neil wasn't the leader of the program, everyone recognized that Neil fulfilled the role that everyone needed for the games to be successful. So, of course, you as a leader are going to attend these meetings. So your job, though, is maybe not what you think. Your job is to listen and listen carefully, to not judge, and rarely to steer. Let the team do its own steering. Your job is to ask good questions, questions that create a constructive, creative tension. Particularly, there's two questions that I like a lot. One is, how could we fill in the blank? And the other question is, what next? What next? Because both of those questions drive people forward to ideas and forward into action. And it's those ideas and action that the team is all about. As a leader, you're going to emphasize the importance of the work based on purpose, remember, not the deadline. Deadlines tend to kill innovation efforts. You need to have some targets, but not impossible ones. You're going to praise participation rather than outcomes. On the first curve, we tend to praise people who achieve their targets. On the second curve, we need to praise people just because they're doing the work, because that's what kind of motivation they'll need. Achieving your targets is the kind of motivation that they need on the first curve. So taken together, the leader has an important role, but it's not what you think. Remember VUCA? Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity? Well, building an innovation team helps you manage complexity, that third letter, because it allows you to use all of your resources, your people, to focus on one important issue at a time and get results. It It allows you to narrow down the field of possibilities to something you can achieve. You may have multiple teams. If you have enough staff for that, good for you. If you don't, pick one and carry on carefully with a well-managed team. So the third theme today is to build an innovation team. So it's the end of the day. Day over day, there's been some improvements, some good results, some more areas to have attention to, and you're ready to take off and head home at the, but before that, you're going to have your end of day check-in meeting. What are you going to say? Exactly what are you going to say? Well, first of all, you know that innovation is an inside job. And so you have decided already that innovation has a priority and it's important every day. Well, you need to say so to the team. I once witnessed a leader lead an organization that was somewhat adrift. And he did a simple thing. He had a fridge magnet created, and he circulated it to all 15,000 employees in the organization. One fridge magnet each. And some people would thought, there's a waste of money. But in a few weeks, people started using the language that was on that fridge magnet. He made 4 points, only 4 points, simple language, maybe they're 15 words, 16. In about a month, people would come to job interviews and talk to those 4 points as though they were the center pole, the mission and vision of the organization. And it's when this leader recognized that he hadn't done a good enough job of managing the sense of purpose that people had. And the fridge magnet took over as the sense of purpose. So at the end of the day, it's a very important part of the day because it's when your attitude is most on display. You're tired, your defenses are down, your people might be a little frustrated from what they've been facing during the day, even more frustrated if they're dealing with the new challenges face us from COVID-19. They're trying to innovate, they're trying to perform, they're trying to get results, and what they need is reassurance. So what you need to do as a leader is to craft your attitude. Now, what do I mean by that? CYA, no, not what you think it means. Craft your attitude. Well, you know that innovation is an inside job. And in this case, at the end of the day, at that important meeting, you have to reach inside yourself and then reach out from there. Let me tell you a story about Neil. A fellow manager who I liked and respected came to me after I'd been there about 6 months and said, James, everyone I've talked to thinks that you're a know-it-all Toronto boy. And you probably need to do something about it. And I was in shock. I didn't think I was a know-it-all. I don't think I'd told anybody where I was born, much less tell them I'm from Toronto. So I thought about it. I considered what I needed to do to change. But I went to have a chat with Neil, because by now Neil was a confidant, not only a supervisor. And in Neil's implacable way, he leaned forward a little bit, looked me in the eye and said, James, everyone knows you're smart. They need to know that you care. And with that piece of wisdom, I went away and started expressing what I cared about, what I believed, what I stood for. And the rest, as they say, is history. I crafted an attitude. And I think there are 5 characteristics that we should remember when we are expressing the importance of innovation to team members. First of all, I think we need to express confidence. In particular, we want to express confidence in people's ability, not confidence that they'll get a result. That may be what we hope for, but a good leader is going to focus on confidence in that person's ability to get the result, because trusting someone's ability will motivate them. Trusting someone's deliverability can backfire. So the first thing we're going to do is show that we believe in their strengths and help them understand their strengths if they don't. The second one is our respect. We're going to show respect for people's creativity, and in particular for their courage. To be creative, we need a safe environment. And it takes courage to offer a creative idea, an alternative point of view, a dissenting view, new information. And we need to show respect for people when they have the courage to speak up. The A stands for action. It's important that as a leader, we have an action orientation. That's part of where that question, what next, comes from. We lean on that question and we think about what do we do to capture that idea. So someone comes up with an idea for a new product in this restaurant that's struggling. What new product do people need? Well, you didn't used to serve coffee to go all the time, but now people will need coffee to go. How do we do that? Well, let's try it is often the magic words that leaders need to speak. They need to take an action orientation. And usually that's around experimentation. And this is where the willingness to be an experimenter shows up. Now, this is a deep subject, being an experimenter, but I wanted to make sure it was embedded in this idea called attitude. Then there's the F word. Failure has value. Failure has an important value, and we need to embrace it, expect it. In some cases, some organizations reward it, because if you're failing, you are at least trying things. And it's the trying that we're trying to encourage. Failures will happen. We will try to offer coffee to go and people won't like it. People won't buy it. But we tried, and we've learned that what they really want is water to go. And so we've learned something new and we're going to carry on. And finally, T. Traction. Traction is better than perfection. We want progress, forward motion. Innovation could be radical, or it could be achieved increment by increment. It could be either way, but we need traction in that direction. That's why many creative people talk about prototyping, not just talking and waving their arms, but also creating models, creating attempts, doing surveys, gathering information, getting closer and closer to an end result. So if we can craft our attitude, if we can carry those attitudes around with us, we will make a significant contribution to the people who are following. I want to mention before I go that these ideas are all drawn out of the research. This is something that has been shown to be important. I summarize them here as though they're simple ideas, but knowing them, that there's research behind it, should encourage you to understand and accept their credibility. Remember VUCA? Yeah, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Well, C.R.A.F.T helps us in the face of complexity because it allows us to be direct about what's most important. And it helps us with ambiguous because it allows you to be clear at a time when many things aren't clear. So if you can be clear about your support for a person, that will carry as much weight as you could possibly imagine, and more weight perhaps than being clear about what's going to happen in June, because you've dealt with something that's at the core of the person you're talking to. So our fourth and final theme was craft your attitude. So let's just summarize briefly. We talked about leading with purpose and sharing a vision, and especially connecting it to what people do every day. Second, we talked about getting ahead of the curve, not only leading from the first curve, which is about efficiency and productivity, but also leading from the second curve, which is about creative interests. Third thing we talked about is exploring ways to solve your biggest thorniest issue. And we do that by building an innovation team, small or large. And your role is to encourage, listen, praise, to emphasize the importance of the work and the importance of taking action and not being the sole source of ideas. And what says crafts more than popsicle sticks? The last idea was to craft your attitude, meaning to show confidence in people, to respect their creativity and courage, to have an action orientation, to embrace failure, and to prefer traction over perfection. And that will help you lead innovation. So it's your turn. I have a couple questions here that you can consider now that I've completed the presentation. The first question for you to consider is, if you could get a do-over, what's one thing you've done at work that you would do over? Think about that for just a minute. Garrett, that's long enough. Now, if you want to type your answer into the chat box, you could do that. The real value is thinking about this. Is there one thing that I've done in the past that would be better done a different way?
We'll wait for some chat comments to come, but James, we just have a few more minutes before 2 o'clock, so just be mindful if people have to jump on to another meeting or so.
Sure.
We have some comments regarding a failure. Richard reduces the emotionally exhausted employees by sharing his vision and, well, that's a long comment, by sharing his vision and propensity to give employees fail and learn.
That's great. That's great. The second question I want you to carry away with you, we don't have a time to do the sharing the way we want to, but think of something that you've tried that really did actually work. Remember a time when you tried something and it worked. And the last question I want to leave you with is, what's one idea that you've heard today that you might consider you might possibly try in the future? What have you heard that you might try in the future?
We have a really good comment here, positive attitude. That's
right
a
on.
Good drive for the future.
Right on. So let me leave you with a final thought. After a 2-year study of 280 innovation teams, that great company Google discovered the one single difference between innovative teams and non-innovative teams. What was it? Smart people? Lots of money? Lots of time? Easy problems? No. The single greatest factor was having a sense of psychological safety. When people felt safe to try new things, felt safe in opening themselves up, felt safe to share ideas, when they had that sense of safety, they could bring their full selves to work. And that full self is what contributes to innovation and that you are looking for as an innovation leader. So, innovation is an inside job. What's inside you? And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much. And I will gladly take any more questions that may have risen on the chat line.
We just have some comments. I like the idea related to show the end results of innovation. Thank you very much, James. There is another comment. If I were to change anything, it will be changing. Just comments keep going up.
Good.
I've lost it. So let's end it in the sense of, if you have any specific questions, feel free to put them in the chat or send them directly to me by email. You will get a copy of recording afterwards. And if there are any specific questions that you would like James or I to think about, we can both work on it and share a follow-up message with all of you. It was an absolute pleasure, James, having you with us today. I look forward to working with you in the future on maybe more face-to-face interactions as well. You never know when things will change. And for everyone else, thank you for joining us today. We have other themes scheduled for future webinars, so make sure to subscribe to our Eventbrite page, follow up Fanshawe on social media platforms as well, and then we are here to help one another. So if there's anything we could do more of, just let us know.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and everyone is just saying thank you, everyone. It was a very good presentation, so hopefully to the next round. Take care.